Football, soccer, le foot, jungpeng, whatever you call it in your part of the world, I love it. I watch it, I read about it, I live it, I breathe it. But watching the sport that Pele called the beautiful game recently, I've been feeling a little empty, nostalgic even. Watching players talking in interviews like robots, seeing technology rule out a goal for having a pube offside, witnessing pundits analyse a sideways pass to the nth degree. Is it all getting a bit diluted? Dull? Samey? Was football actually better back in the day, back in the 90s and early 2000s? Surely, being in my 40th year on this planet, I'm qualified to take a look at this commonly asked question. So join me on a journey as I attempt to answer, was footy better back in the day? Stick around to find out. Firstly, when I said jungpeng at the start of the video, there's no such word. I made it up to sound clever. Worked though, didn't it? You thought, wow, he's cultured and intelligent. Anyway, this is a question that's been asked time and time again across the interweb, and it's an interesting one. So Exhibit A, roll on some footage of footy back in the day. I can't show too much footage due to ridiculous copyright laws, but you get the gist. How can football have been better when it's played by unfit players with silly hair on awful pitches, played on by teams that had a transfer budget of £3.75? Not much has changed really over the years, just tactics and technology and stadiums and safety and player fitness and nutrition and club scouting and data and rules and finances and globalisation with social media. But apart from that, not much has changed. Footy is still fundamentally the same thing. You kick a little leather ball, well technically a polyurethane or polyvinyl chloride ball, between some sticks. This happens pretty much the same now as it did 100 years ago. So let's compare certain subjects between eras such as technology and tactical changes, talk about a few badass players from the 90s, and I'll tally up the results at the end but ultimately get you to come to your own conclusions on whether it's better now or then. 1. Technology. Let's address the elephant in the room. Although I imagine in the process of crossing into the room, someone somewhere got the camera out and measured the exact line when he entered the room. Back in the day, you'd be lucky if the scoreboard's electronic, whereas nowadays someone sat about 650 miles away analyses every minute detail with cameras all over the stadium. Footballs have little microchips in them. Magnetic fields detect whether a ball's crossed the line. I mean, a bit late for that now, but technology has taken over football. VAR was cleared for use in 2018 for errors that are clear and obvious, whereas the only thing clear and obvious about it is that nobody knows how it bloody works. But after a rough intro, it started to settle down a bit. The Premier League claims that 96% of decisions are the right ones compared to 82% before VAR. I'd question which referees they were employing if only 82% of decisions were correct, but some think VAR takes the emotion out of the sport, but does it really? Players and fans still celebrate like before. And look at Man City's disallowed goal against Spurs in the Champions League and tell me there's no emotion. Just because it doesn't always go in favour of your club doesn't mean there's no emotion. Goal line technology works quite well, mostly, and semi-automated offside technology improves the speed of offside decisions, thankfully. I mean, they couldn't get much slower, although it still needs human interaction. And talking of human interaction, back in the day there was no phones in the stands taking shitty footage of a goal happening right in front of their own actual eyes, so there's also that, I guess. Yes, some decisions take 84 years to come to the right conclusion, and in some cases VAR actually amplifies mistakes rather than eradicate them, but last season the average decision was reached in 64 seconds. Still a silly amount of time, but not quite the 20 minutes people would have you believe. Ultimately, football's a sport. In sport, you want the right decisions to be made. Does it matter how those decisions are reached? So look at the scoreboard. At the risk of being lynched in the comments, I can't quite decide on which era wins, so I'll come back to this one later. 2. Tactics. Football has come a long way since the 1-1-8 formation of the early days, with the only tactic to kick it as long as you can and chase after it. But 90s tactics didn't really allow teams to stifle creative players with intelligent tactics. They were just free to go do their thing. These days the Pep Guardiola influence can be seen everywhere. Watch a Premier League game, Pep influence. Watch the Spanish Cup, Pep influence. Watch the Romanian 4th Division, Pep influence. Everywhere you look, players dropping back into their own back line to start build-up play, goalkeepers pinging passes in the build-up, as teams play a brand of tippy-tappy tiki-taka football. Players defend higher up the pitch and have to take more risks these days, especially defenders. Long-range shooting has also declined since the 2000s. And we haven't even mentioned the gegenpress or the false nine or whatever other fancy words have entered the football world. It's all changed, it's a different game. Does that mean it's more gooder? And terminology's changed too. If you mention the word Ronaldo to Zidane, he'd probably headbutt you. Say the word trequartista to Rivaldo and he'd cover his face in absolute disbelief. It's all evolved over time. We live in the days of tactical innovation and analysis, with teams using more advanced strategies and formations, and sometimes the system changes a player. Case in point, Jack Grealish. He was far more fun at Villa than at City, like a free spirit, where he became a part in the City machine with less room to express himself. It might not be as fun, and spoiler alert, I might talk about fun later, but in terms of tactics alone, some matches can be fascinating chess matches, with current tactics being far better than before. So look at the scoreboard: old days 0, current era 1. 3. Character. Football just had so much more character back then, didn't it? Players and managers who were just raw and charismatic. While each era has its exceptions, look at a few interviews. Players like Gazza making weird noises into the camera. Roy Keane's battle cry.
Patrick Vieira's 6'4" and starts having a go at Gary Neville. He says, come and have a go at me. Simple as that.
Cantona babbling on about Seagulls after kicking some fucker in the head. Even Joey Barton speaking French.
All everybody speak about is this tackle.
Et c'est pas uniquement les joueurs. Sorry, I caught whatever Barton had there for a moment. But managers with character as well. Keegan almost crying into the microphone. Cloughy talking about his player's big head.
On this lad's big head.
Roy Hodgson telling interviewers to not be silly.
So let's not take the piss here.
Like I said, there are exceptions in both eras, but it just seems that there was so much more character back in the day. The top class players had a certain je ne sais quoi, an aura, an energy which would be out of place today. Could it be that football is just a more serious sport these days? Is it that sponsors don't want to be associated with silliness? Or could it just be all the media training that modern players receive? Think of it like a new car. New motors have all the horsepower, luxuries and safety features, but does it have the feel of the engine, the soul of a Ford Escort, the personality of a Capri, the smell of a Mustang? So I would love it if the olden days had a win in this category, due to the players and managers having more character. Over to the scoreboard: old days 1, current era 1. Number 4, competition. Look at the last few title winners. In England it's generally either Man City or Liverpool. In Germany it's Bayern every year except for one. In Spain it's the same two most years. Rinse and repeat all across Europe. Looking at the 10 seasons from 96 and the last 10 seasons since 2016, the number of different teams who have won some of Europe's top leagues has dropped massively, like Neymar after a tackle. It's dropped in Spain and Portugal. It's halved in Germany and France. The same small number of European teams are winning their leagues. But back in the day, leagues are more competitive, not just in England, but across European competition too. Take the Champions League, and the number of different teams winning it has also dropped in the last 40 years. Money's got a lot to answer for, more on that later, but with the odd exception, football's generating the same small section of winners every time. There's some recent exceptions such as Girona, Brest and Bologna, but more teams challenging for trophies every year means a win for the olden days. The scoreboard says old days 2, current era 1. Number 5, the players and teams. Is it just me, or is there an absence of absolute ballers these days? Mavericks who single-handedly drag teams through seasons. Players like, and strap in because this is going to smash your nostalgia senses, Cantona, Gascoigne, Roberto Baggio, Rivaldo, Boban, Ronaldinho, Riquelme, Stoichkov, Nedved, Di Canio, Ginola, Figo, Kinkladze, Gullit, Pirlo, Bergkamp, Akacha, Laudrup, that's the good one, not Brian, Henry, Totti, Zidane, Agi, Ortega, Rui Costa, Letizia, Zola. Hell, even Maradona was still playing in the mid-90s, and I haven't even mentioned some of the goal-scoring Mavericks such as Batistuta, Ronaldo, Drogba, Grafite, Del Piero, Ravanelli, Jardel, Romario, Edmundo, Shearer, Van Basten, Raul, Assabank, Papan, Weah, Shevchenko, Van Hooijdonk, Bebeto, Mackay, Paoletta, Inzaghi, Elber, Larson, Balbo, Owen, Van Nistelrooy, Crespo, Kluivert, York, Cole, Bihar, Fieri, Suker, Chiesa, Salas, Zamorano, Mijatovic, and breathe. But have we got our rose-tinted glasses on? So I did a little digging to compare stats of players past and current to see whether players of the 90s really were that much better. I looked at an attacking player's goal involvement at how many minutes per goal or assist. The answers were quite revealing. Mario Jardel is sandwiched in between Mbappe and Ronaldo. Marco van Basten has a similar rate to Suarez and Lewandowski. Kane is slightly ahead of the OG Ronaldo, who is only slightly ahead of Van Nistelrooy. Lautaro Martinez has a similar rate to Henry, who has a similar rate to Giovanni Albert. Insigne was one of the top forwards on the planet for a few years, but he's sandwiched between Shearer and Batistuta. The point being, for every Suarez you give me, I'll give you Van Basten. For every Lewandowski, I'll give you Romario. For every Osimhen, I'll give you Henrik Larsson. You give me a Lautaro Martinez and I'll give you a Giovanni Albert. Put these freaks of nature aside and most strikers from each era are comparable to each other. I think a lack of TV coverage in the 90s added a sense of mystique to some of the players, as we only got to see them on the big occasions. These days we get notifications every time a player farts, but back then we only saw them when they turned up against their teams, banged in a couple of goals and then went swanning back to their exotic leagues. But, and there is a big but and I cannot lie, there are a few arguments to be made either way. In the 90s corner, hard men shared pitches with artists and geniuses. Look around these days. Where can you see another Vinnie Jones, Roy Keane, Duncan Ferguson, Julian Dix, Stuart Pearce, Paolo Montero, Jimmy Bullard, Thomas Repka, or a Billy Whitehurst who actually took part in bare knuckle fights on his days off? The matches and players were more physical and there was less of this diving and rolling around the floor in agony after a rival player brushed you on the shoulder. But in the modern corner, players are more fit and athletic with better conditioning and training methods, and it's more of a team sport these days rather than the sport of individuals, with teams defending better as a unit, with players who aren't highly skilled but can follow direction. I present to you Jordan Henderson for example. Players are more like cogs in a machine. Some of the players who played 20 years ago and had great careers would be debatable whether they'd have great careers these days, but I have a theory on why there seem to be more superstar players back in the day. In the grainy days of the mid-90s, UEFA had a rule that teams could only field a maximum of 5 foreigners, so superstars were more spread out across the teams. As it seemed that every other team had a maverick player, if you also throw in that loads of teams had unique kits and designs which are more daring and bold, it adds to the nostalgia for iconic players. Sponsors also add to that nostalgia. Think of Ronaldo and it's hard not to think of Pirelli. Think of Batigol, not think of a Nintendo GameCube. These days kits are just a boring template designed more as fashion items. Kit manufacturers lift off one badge, put on another, and hey presto, that'll be 90 quid please. And talking of teams, nostalgia also clouds our judgment of the top teams. Real Madrid of a few years ago had Figo, Zidane, Roberto Carlos, Beckham, Ronaldo, Owen, but we forget they also had Gravison, Faubert, De La Red, Granero, Mosquera and Royston Drenthe. The average player now is a lot better than the average player from before. Simply put, these days sporting excellence is taken for granted, so it's quite possible after looking at things sensibly that in the fight between the two sides it's a draw on points. The scoreboard shows old days 3, current era 2. 6. Finances and TV. You may not have noticed, but ticking prices have gone up in recent times, with a ticket to a league match these days costing about the same as a small house. And increases in prices can be traced back to a small company called Sky. Back in 1992, on the introduction of the Premier League, Sky won the race for the TV rights. I could bore you with a load of info on the battle for TV rights over the years, but the short version is that Sky boss Rupert Murdoch used sport, and in particular the Premier League, as a bargaining tool to sell Sky TV subscriptions, something that Silvio Berlusconi did over in Italy. People bought subscriptions which increased their revenue, which increased the money spent on TV rights and money given to clubs, rinse and repeat. As other companies entered the picture, they wanted a piece of the Premier League pie, so bidding wars started which drove prices up. Why am I telling you this? It's not uncommon for modern teams to just be run or exploited for profit. Before, players were only players. Nowadays they're a whole business with imaging rights and other such nonsense. There was no sports washing, or at least not as much of it, the World Cups in 1978 and 1934 being older high profile examples. The consequence of all this cash being thrown around is that fans can be priced out of matches. Before the million different options to watch football, great football teams and moments were covered in mystique. A long way away, not just geographically, but in every possible way. But is it really a bad thing that we can consume our favourite sport in many different ways? Scoreboard shows old days 3, current era 3. Numero 7. Social media and the need for stats. When I was a teenager, the internet was still a baby. I had to ask for permission whenever I wanted to use it because it cut off the phone line. And it made a funny noise when it connected. Sorry about that. Some of my phones had Snake, whereas these days people can send you pictures of their snake. But social media changed the dynamic fans have with their club forever. Remember early on when I said players were more mysterious? Social media shows us everything. Clubs putting out videos of their players and their pants getting changed in the locker room. Sure, it's sometimes fun, such as clubs mocking each other, but there was no online nonsense or trolling or boring irrelevant debates about Messi and Ronaldo. We celebrated brilliance rather than XG, heat maps and other stats. We watched football with our eyes. Stats don't tell the full story. Compare Pirlo with De Bruyne and KDB would be the clear winner, with zero consideration of the impact that Pirlo had on matches, pulling the strings in the centre of the park. Now, goals are uploaded within seconds to an audience of millions. Back in the 90s, the brilliant Football Italia was my way of watching Italian football. But not only was it brilliant, with top bants, but it was on Channel 4. Pretty much everyone had Channel 4, no subscription needed. But if I wanted to watch what Gazzo or Roberto Baggio were doing over in Italia, I had to wait a week to watch it on Channel 4. Clearly that's not as good, but added to the mystique and excitement. But football was just more fun without the endless need for comparing shots on target and a player's ball possession under matches shots existing expected stat or whatever. For me, the olden days just edges it for a score of old days 4, current era 3. Numero 8, fun factor. And talking of fun, is football still fun? Fun is unique to each viewer, but I have fun watching top players banging worldies and watching shithousery between players and teams. But was it more fun to watch way back when? Football was arguably technically and tactically more shite, but has it become too defensive? Are teams now more scared to attack than their excitement for scoring a goal? It's often forgotten among the nostalgia that games are often tight and scrappy. Some games have become remembered more for aggro rather than the actual football. Before the matches there was often enormous hype around them, but they were often crap. Case in point, two of the biggest box office teams of the time between 2004 and 2007, Chelsea, managed by the special box office manager Jose Mourinho, who won three leagues with them, respect man, and Liverpool, who reached 2 Champions League finals during that time with Rafa at the wheel. They played 16 times during this period, and 10 of those 16 matches contained 1 goal or less. The football was rarely as box office as the hype leading up to it. Elsewhere, Everton finished in the Champions League place with a negative goal difference, and Alaves qualified for the UEFA Cup also with a minus goal difference. The problem is, YouTube highlights would have people think that back in the day every goal was a 25-yard screamer, but football was more pantomime. Look at that Battle of the Buffet, 2 of the top teams of the era. But you wouldn't have thought it when, within the first 37 seconds, Vieira's first pass went straight to an opponent, Ronaldo slipped and lost the ball to Reyes, Lauren hit a long hopeful ball straight to Sylvestre, Gary Neville saw the clearance charged down by Reyes, a misplaced pass from Scholes which was unusual in itself, but it set Ronaldo off to chase and he was clattered by Ashley Cole, all within the first 37 seconds. Perhaps the standards weren't as good as we all remember. And what else is less fun? Bookings for mildly annoying an opposing team, you can't do a Chelsea anymore, matches being played 6 million miles away from home, boring looking template stadiums with patterns outlawed, PSR, which is understandable in theory but now means that fans need to learn about their club's cash flow and amortisation, and also means clubs selling academy players to comply with the rules. And talking of rules, there are completely different refereeing rules and standards these days. Some would say that there aren't any standards at all, but there are people who long for an era when the hard jobs wiped out the top players or bullied them with intimidation tactics and got away with it. Do we really want player safety being at risk? But with current attitudes towards fouls, players are protected more and are scoring more goals, roughly a goal a game more than 20 years ago. So can it really be boring when we're seeing many more goals than before and when there are so many matches that swing unpredictably from one way to another like the past few seasons? A look at the scoreboard shows old days 4, current era 4. So is it just nostalgia talking? Ask my dad and he'd say the 60s and 70s were the best. He'd probably bleat on about Best and Greaves and Charlton, that's Bobby, not Athletic. And if I asked my son, which I wouldn't because he doesn't like football, but if he did, he'd probably bang on about Ronaldo and Messi and Mbappe. The eras are personal to each individual. It's where in time that the connections are made. I mean, the posters on my wall as a kid were Ronaldo and Schmeichel. What kind of weird kid has a goalkeeper on their wall? Anyway, coming back to that first one where I discussed technology. Just to cause outrage, each era gets a point to level the scores at 5-5. Why? Because this whole video is just a means of debate. Each category could have gone either way, and I don't think you can even compare eras, and that's the beauty of football. And that's it. Thanks for watching. If you've got a view on which era's better, then feel free to abuse me in the comments. That's how YouTube works. But if you do abuse me, make sure you also leave a like and a sub just to balance it all out. Let's debate in the comments, and after you've done that, watch these because they're awesome. You're awesome for watching, and see you later.